Auburn is not a place, it is a people. The loveliest village on the plains is more than a college sports venue, more than a university filled with historic buildings, more than a quaint little southern town. Its worth lies within its people, those that call Auburn home, whether that be for a single day at a time or for a lifetime. Much like our legendary Toomer's oak trees, our stories are the product of a firm foundation laid in the beginning of our Auburn story. These are the stories of the Auburn family. These are their roots.
War Eagle Auburn family, and welcome back to Auburn Roots. This is our journey of exploring and sharing the stories of your Auburn family members. On episode 26, my next guest is someone that you're probably very familiar with on the Auburn social media sphere. You're also probably very aware of his podcast, AU Wishbone, but mostly he's a great Auburn family member. And I'm proud to announce that we'll be today speaking to Mr. Van Allen Plexico. Van, thank you so much for joining me on Auburn Roots.
Hey, Kyle. Great to be here. I appreciate you thinking of me for this program. It's very exciting.
Absolutely. You, as I told you pre-show, we have had you high on our list, and just getting around to you now feels like such a travesty because, you know, it feels like a podcaster should make the priority to bring another podcaster on because at least they know what we go through, right?
Oh, we do go through things, don't we?
Technology, trying to figure out what we're going to talk about. You know, that's the whole thing too. You know, and I remember from listening to some of y'all's past podcasts of, I think it was you discussed, your wife's always like, well, football season's over. What are you going to talk about? I mean, there's always plenty to talk about, even in the Auburn football sphere. And you should know that from this off season as well. So I hope that anybody out there will go and check out AU Wishbone, obviously after this, and we'll talk about that some more as we go throughout this episode today. But Van, where I like to start with this is not even in your Auburn story. Can you give me just a little bit of background about yourself in terms of outside of Auburn stuff, kind of where you're from, you know, who you were raised by, where all that good stuff? If he sat you down on a couch and explained that to me.
Some might say there's not a lot to me outside of Auburn. It's funny. Most of the folks that know me in Illinois and places like this, anytime anything Auburn ever comes up, they're like, I immediately thought of you. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm that person, you know, to be the person they think of. Other than Auburn, I guess, I'm originally from Sylacauga, Alabama. And, my dad graduated from Auburn. And so I became an Auburn fan very early on, back in the mid 70s as a little kid when things were not very good football wise, but Auburn was Auburn, and I always figured I would go there, and I did, and I got 2 degrees from there and spent the late 80s and the early 90s there on and off. And then I'm a professor of history and political science at Southwestern Illinois in my day job, and I write superhero and science fiction and football books and comics and all kind of stuff when I'm not teaching. So, and I've got a great wife and 2 awesome girls, and I live very close to St. Louis on the Illinois side of the river. So, and I've been all around the world. I've kind of I've lived in Atlanta for a long time and loved it. I lived in Singapore for about a year, and it was cool, or very hot but cool. And I've been up here now for about 15 years. So I don't know. Does that run down my resume pretty well?
That is quite a resume. You know, usually I'm not surprised to hear that someone's got at least some type of tie to Alabama. But then you go to the whole Illinois where you are now. But I was not aware Singapore was in your past as well. So what were you doing in Singapore?
I was there for about a year, I guess it was between Atlanta. Well, it was before I moved full time from Atlanta to here. I was, as most tragic stories seem to, it involved having a woman involved, like as Jimmy Buffett would say, right? There must be a woman to blame. That's Jimmy Buffett, not me. I take no blame for that. But no, yeah, we went over there for about a year, but then because she had a job opportunity there, but then it didn't work out, and so I came back. But it was a really cool life experience. It was neat to be on the other side literally on the opposite side of the world. When it was noon in Atlanta, it was midnight in Singapore, and a place where it's 95 degrees all day, every day of the year for 365 days a year. So. And it was just cool. It was just a neat thing to kind of get a different experience, you know. So
you brought up twice now how hot it is in Singapore. How would you compare it to those summers down in lower Alabama?
Well, that's the funny thing. there's two funny things there. One is Singapore is always like 85 to 95 degrees, but when I left Atlanta to go there, it was like 105 in Atlanta. So now, 6 months later, it would be 20 or 15 in Atlanta, but it was much hotter in Atlanta than it was in Singapore. I was like, oh, it's much cooler here. And they were like, oh, the other thing was that I had to get like 40 different kind of vaccinations to go there. And I get there and it's just the cleanest, most pristine place. And I'm like, man, I'm going to want shots to go back to Georgia after this,
Absolutely.
Georgia looked more like the third world than Singapore. So come on.
Absolutely. I understand that. It's funny when you go over there. I always kind of like to hear about people's perspectives who've spent a little bit of time in a different country, especially not just a different part of our country as Auburn fans. Speaking of which, did you have any War Eagle moments out there in Singapore?
No, they didn't really have a clue about it. I wore Auburn stuff a lot. I had my hats and I had a T-shirt, but no, it's funny. Here there was one moment that was kind of like that, but from my other passion that has an A logo, which is the Avengers. I've run the Avengers website for 25 years. I had an Avengers website before Marvel had a website.
Wow.
And because I was at Auburn, I forgot the Auburn connection. My roommate in graduate school in the early 90s worked at the Division of University Computing. So he taught me HTML coding when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
So we were going over to the Duck building in Auburn and creating web pages almost before anybody was. And that page is still there. It's still there. It's moved around a little bit. But so I had I've had AvengersAssemble.net for 25 years. Well, I was in Singapore and I was walking through a mall and there was an Avengers T-shirt and it was like from that card game or something years ago. And I went in and I told the little the Chinese kid behind the counter, I said, hey, I'd like to buy that Avengers shirt. And he's like, no, it's not for sale. I'm like, that's too bad. I run the website for them. And he goes, you're Van Allen Plexico? So a little kid in Singapore knew who I was. That's crazy.
So you get noticed for that aspect of your life, but not the Auburn fan of, the family stretches far and wide, but there are still parts of the world where we haven't infected it yet, which is probably a good thing in some sense. We can be a bit much as an Auburn family at times. So I'm happy to know that.
but without Auburn, I wouldn't have had the website and then he wouldn't have known me.
Absolutely. So it all comes back to Auburn, even if it was not there in Singapore.
It all does. Everything goes back to Auburn.
Let's go back a little bit further, back to childhood. You said you grew up in Sylacauga. One thing I like to get a perspective on people, especially where they spent a lot of their maybe younger years growing up as an Auburn fan. Sylacauga is not that far removed from Auburn, Alabama. If I'm doing math correct in my head and distances, it's probably like an hour and change. Does that sound about right distance-wise?
Depending on what year you're making that drive. It when I started, it was about an hour and a half. Now it's like 45 minutes. So because they kept improving that highway on 280.
Yeah, it's quite a little adventure on 280. It can be one of the most boring drives in the world, but it can also be one of the more interesting drives, the things that you'll see on 280. Driving from Birmingham to Auburn, tell me what growing up in Sylacauga was like as an Auburn fan. Was there a lot of Bama fans influence there, or was it strictly Auburn? Oh, no.
Oh, God.
He's got his head in his
flashbacks. Well, understand that Sylacauga High School, their color is red, and they play in Legion Stadium.
Mm.
And their band is the $500,000 band. Are you getting a picture?
I'm getting a picture right now, and I don't like it, man. Please don't paint this any further. I'm kidding.
All the teachers just about went to Alabama, and they'd all wrap class up early on Fridays to get over to Tuscaloosa in a hurry for the game, or Birmingham. So, man, yeah. But the funny thing is, way more of my classmates went to Auburn than went to Alabama. Back, this was back in high school. This was back in the early mid 80s. And Auburn was growing a lot faster than Alabama back then. Auburn's enrollment back then was like 24,000, and Alabama's was like 15, something like that. And so a lot more of my classmates went with me down to Auburn than went to Alabama. But yeah, I mean, it was, think about this, from first grade through ninth grade, Alabama won the Iron Bowl every year.
Mm.
That was the last 4 of Suge and the 5 of Barfield from my first grade through ninth grade. So it was rough. It was tough, but that's why that 1982 bow over the top Iron Bowl. I mean, people that are a bit younger, I think can't fully they can look back and see the statistic. Oh, we beat them that year, ended the streak. Cool, but you don't understand when your entire life, your entire memories are Alabama beating Auburn every year. The only question was, would we make it close until the fourth quarter when they pulled away?
Mm-hmm.
And so that 82 Bo freshman year Iron Bowl was, just the greatest thing ever up to that point.
Right.
People just, you had to kind of be there, to get
right.
how big that was. So, yeah.
I'm actually glad you brought that up because I think it brings up a topic for modern day as well, because you talked about an era where your adolescence was defined by Alabama dominance. We're going through a time where there's my generation had lived with Auburn being the dominant program, especially with 6 years under Tuberville, and to some degree at least, and compared to what history says there for Alabama. Theirs is probably a little bit more extensive, but we'll celebrate a 6-year win streak as much as we can. But then you get this national championship, and now there's been this we'll call it era of not really meeting those expectations. And I feel like there's a lot of Auburn fans don't appreciate our history and what we had to go through, such as you through your adolescence, and the struggle that it was to even sniff a victory from the Alabama Crimson Tide. And it just doesn't seem like we're satisfied as much anymore. Do you get a sense of that it's kind of changed that much within the Auburn family, or is the foundation really still what you discussed there?
No, I think it's every decade is different. Every generation is different. Everybody's perceptions are, what they experienced, what it was like for them. And there's folks older than me. My dad was there 57 through 60. And so he's like, well, I was there. We were winning national championship and everything. And I'm like, oh, that's great. But, yeah, everybody has a different perspective. And I totally, like Mira, my younger daughter is 12, and, she doesn't even remember Cam or anything. And so her perspective is that we lose to them all the time again. I'm like, her experience is kind of like mine, Yeah. So, people in between us, though, have a completely different view. So it's one of those things that just always it's always changing. It's always different. So.
It's very cyclical right now, and hopefully it doesn't keep cycling back too soon here. Well, actually, we hope it cycles back to our end and stays there a little bit longer than it did in the past. But let's talk a little bit more about you as an Auburn fan younger. It sounds like there was no choice other than Auburn for you. Is that correct?
I don't know if I'd go that far. I think that my older sister and older brother had gone to junior college briefly, Alex City, but they didn't go to 4-year school. And so it was kind of up to me if anybody was going to carry on, our dad's legacy to a certain degree. And that was always kind of my intent. We were Auburn fans. My dad had graduated from there. We liked the sports. It wasn't that far away. It was very reasonably priced. You don't even want to know what my tuition was when I was there. It'd make you pull your hair out and scream, and the rent. But I thought I wasn't just going to blindly go down that path. I thought about it if there was something that would be better for me professionally or whatever. But ultimately, because I got like a scholarship offer to I guess Livingston, whatever it's called. I guess it's West Alabama now or something. Mm-hmm. No, I always wanted to go to Auburn. And my best friends were going there. We all were roommates freshman year and everything. So I think it was always it was going to happen. I just wanted to make sure that was right for me first.
You talked a lot about your dad carrying on his legacy and stuff. Is that something that you kind of really wore proudly, that you were the one son that was living on through that legacy for his father?
Yeah. My mom's side of the family are Alabama folks.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
We all got them, don't we?
My grandparents on my mother's side, they just worship Bear Bryant. They would go over there, every year for games. But it was just cool to me to know that my dad had done that, and that if he could do it, I could do it. It kind of gave me a confidence that it was something I could do, that I was able to do it. So
yeah. And I think that goes back to the whole thing about the Auburn family. Sometimes it is overplayed here, but there is such a strong family connection outside of just the general Auburn family concept. It goes back to just, families that your father, your mother, your brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts that went there. There's usually tends to be some type of strong tie there that draws you there to want you to go experience something that they experience, so you can have those stories, so that you can have those tales to tell and pass on to the next generation and generation before that, so that we can talk about the days when Alabama was so dominant and tell you didn't have it as bad as we did back then in the 90s.
You kids today, you don't understand. In my day, Lord, bear.
Well, it sounds like it was pretty evident that you were going to end up at Auburn, and you ended up there in the late 80s, and you graduated in 1990 with your bachelor's degree. But before we kind of get into what you did after that point, let's talk a little bit about your time at Auburn. So what year did you exactly arrive there?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I graduated high school in May or June of 86 and started Auburn in the fall. But I was such a naive, sheltered little kid. I really didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue. It was all very intimidating to me. And I got down there and ended up in just some bad classes and kind of freaked out. And I immediately, after about 4 days, withdrew and went back home to Sylacauga just to kind of sort out if this was really what I wanted to do, which is kind of funny when you realize my first quarter at Auburn freaked me out so bad I didn't know I even wanted to go to college. And then I proceeded to spend at least some portion of the next 13 years in college. I spent more consecutive years as a college student than as a grade school student.
The money.
And I just got my student loans finished the year before last.
Congrats. Very nice. That's 13 years that you had to pay off. That's incredible.
Well, now remember, the undergrad, it was so cheap I didn't have anything to pay off.
True.
I didn't have any loans or anything. I mean, I couldn't remember because my grandmother would pay them, my tuition bills back in undergrad, way back in the day. But that was just what she wanted to do for our family, was she was going to pay my undergrad tuition. And so I saw one of the receipts one time, and this wasn't even like my first year. It was like later on, like probably 88 or something, or 89. And the tuition was about $375 for a quarter. So it's come a long way.
I wish I had seen that. Makes me a little jealous.
Yep.
And honestly,
I know.
Honestly, now it's gotten even worse, like since I've been out of school for almost 10 years now, and to see the tuition jump since then, I'm like, how are kids even getting out of college without loans? Is anybody even doing it without loans?
No, I mean, my daughter had the best grades you could possibly. My older daughter, she's about to graduate in just a few months from Southern Illinois, and she still had to borrow some money. I mean, she had like all the scholarships, top, 4.0, whatever, all A's in college, and still had to borrow some money. So as little as possible, obviously. Right. But yeah, so all of my student loans came from Georgetown and Emory, not from Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn's been traditionally very stingy with the scholarship money, which is one of those things I kind of take a little bit of pride in, because we're very selective of who we get it to. But then when it's not you receiving some of that, it's kind of like, come on, Auburn, give me a little bit here. Throw me a bone.
Absolutely.
I'm the lifelong Auburn fan.
And they don't do anything for like, legacy type thing. There was a conversation on one of the Auburn email groups last week. It comes up every year about how, somebody says, my kid has great grades. Alabama's offered them all this, UAB has offered them all this. Auburn's offered them nothing. And I graduated from Auburn was what they were saying. Auburn just doesn't come across for out-of-state students or for legacies, and it's disappointing. It's very disappointing.
It is, especially when you're trying to get your kids potentially into college at the rate that things keep increasing. But it's one of those things that I guess that you can find, take solace in the fact that we're very selective, but it can be frustrating as well. You said you had a very difficult, maybe be the best way to say it, beginning of your time at Auburn in terms of if you even wanted to be in college. Was it the classes, or was it homesickness, or what made it so difficult for you?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of everything. And I ended up in some classes. My first quarter kind of ended up accidentally jumping in the deep end of the pool, with some, very demanding professors, demanding classes and stuff. And so I rethought things for a few weeks and then decided to go back. But by that time, it was too late for, that was fall. So it was too late for winter quarter. So I started back in the spring of 87, and I took classes that I said, let me just start out in the shallow end of the pool. So I took like a history class, a drawing class, and like a PE class. I kind of worked my way in the kiddie pool end. And then once I kind of had my feet under me, I started, trying to figure out what my major would be and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I had to work my way back.
So you came in undecided on what you wanted to actually do with your career.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was, I'd forgotten that, but I'm glad you mentioned it. That was the other part of the problem, was that my original intent was to major in journalism. And so my first day, in classes at Auburn, I'm in there with Jack Sims, the great Jack Sims, who is intimidating as anything. And I'm just like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be here. And so I had to come back undecided. It was called GC, General Curriculum. Then it became GLA, General Liberal Arts. And I stayed GLA as long as they would let me. And then they said, all right, you got to pick something now. You can't graduate with no actual major, son. You had to pick something. I'm like, well, let's see. I've been taking classes in political science, history, and geography. Now, clearly in geography, there's like 5 jobs available in the entire country. So that's out. In fact, at the college I teach at now, we have 1 geography professor, 1. So you can see how many jobs there are for that, right? And I thought history, political science, I like them both equally, but political science just sounds more employable somehow. It probably make my dad a little more approving. And so I told him I'm majoring in political science. And my dad says, what do you do with a degree in political science? Just teach future political scientists how to teach future political scientists? And I'm like, maybe. I don't know. But again, it seemed more practical than history. So,
right.
But I probably have more graduate hours in history though than I do in political science now. And most of the classes I teach now are history. So
nice.
What's in demand.
So you graduated in 1990 with that political science degree. About maybe being on campus during your time there outside of academics, what did you get involved with, or was it just school for you?
Well, the first year I was just mostly hanging out with the Sylacauga crowd, and I'd had enough of them in high school. Honestly, I was wanting to meet new people that were a little more exciting than them. And so the best thing that ever happened to me, and I'm glad you asked that, because this is absolutely the best thing that happened to me at Auburn. And that was, I read a flyer stuck on the wall of Haley Center one day that said, come to the organizational meeting for Model United Nations. Because Auburn hosted the Southeastern Invitational, Southeastern Invitational Model United Nations. And I went to that meeting and I met John Ringer, who was in my political science classes too, but this is the first time I actually met him, like not just across the room, And I met about a dozen other of some of my dearest friends to this day, all doing this activity. And so we would put on it was the year-round thing to put on the big event every year in January that we would do at Auburn. But we also traveled to other conferences and other colleges, and so that let me meet a whole bunch of new friends. The other thing it gained me was it was the first time I'd ever really done public speaking, and it's so funny now because all I do every day is public speaking basically, but it means nothing. It's nothing, But back then, I remember the first time I stood up in the Model UN room, like in Brown Hall or wherever it was in that auditorium, I was like, my heart was pounding and I was turning red. I'm like scared to death. So, that was a huge thing for me too. It's interesting how when you go to school, when you go to college, a lot of the skills and things that you learn are not necessarily in class. It really is true that college is about a lot more than just what you learn in class to prepare you for the real world.
Yeah.
And public speaking, having to stand up and talk about, United Nations stuff, on and off, that was a huge developmental part of my young adulthood for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I asked that question, because, we obviously talk about the academic side of things, the sports side of things while we're there, but I think people forget there's this whole other aspect of a college life, and that's your social stuff. And I'm not just talking about parties you might go to, it's more just the friendships you make, the relationships that you build maybe professionally that may come back one day. And obviously you brought up John Ringer. We'll talk about him in just a little bit in your podcast. That obviously came to fruition later on down the road into something big for you too. So that's why I asked that question, because I always want to hear, what were the other things that people were going to get involved in on campus? What was that campus life like? Anything else outside of UN or anything else you got involved with?
Well, I'll tell you this. I think Auburn in the late 1980s was a great place to be. I mean, that was when like the optimism that had come in with Pat Dye and with the President Martin at the time. The campus was expanding and growing. We were getting new buildings, new facilities, and everything just, Auburn in the 70s still was kind of seedy in some ways. And, a lot of it had been around for a while, and all these new big brick buildings and like the aquatic center, the new library extension that's huge, building the eastern upper deck, just so much big stuff happened during the mid and late 80s when I was there. It was just Auburn. I know this is true every time, it never looks the same when you leave as when you first arrive, but it really, I watched a lot of it. The downside was there was never anywhere to park and all the roads were blocked off all the time, but that's kind of how Auburn always is. But no, I loved everything about being at Auburn in the 1980s. It was a great time to be there, and it was a great place to be at that time.
Absolutely. Sports wise was a big thing there when we've held that off as long as we can. Let's talk a little bit about that. You're seeing the heyday of the Pat Dye era while you're there. Describe to me what that's like as a student and the games you're getting to see either in person or just know that I was a student when this was happening. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's true. So like I said, in high school, I was a freshman in high school when we won the Bo Over the Top game. And so the 4 years that I was in high school, you could just feel it building, that Auburn was becoming more impressive, was no longer a joke in some ways from the Barfield, years, that we were back and that we were good again. And that I think, that increased enrollment. I know that students in my freshman class would tell me in class, like, yeah, I just picked this school because I like the football team. And I think that was true of a lot of people because there hadn't been much of a football team to like previously, so going through high school, you're like, well, if I go to Auburn, this seems like a good time to be there. And you get down there and there was electricity in the air every day. Everybody was just so excited to be there and so excited that Auburn was, football really is the lifeblood of Auburn. People that don't have a connection to Auburn I don't think fully appreciate it or understand. They're like, it's a sport. You're not even getting to play it. What do you care? But it's about the morale of the student body and the faculty. It's about the positive energy. It permeates everything. It's like if the batteries were running low on the university and that like plugged it into the wall socket and just lit everything up, just brought oxygen to the room. And so it was just I guess that what I would say is it was just a very optimistic, energized environment during those 4 years, because we won the Iron Bowl all 4 years that I was there. We won the SEC 3 of the years I was there. We went to the Sugar Bowl twice. It was the great win over Florida. John and I have just gone through and done shows about just these games. So, we've talked about them to death, but that's because it made such an impression. Those were milestone events in our lives, in our young lives at that time.
Absolutely.
Sure.
The way I describe it to people when, they ask the same question, it's just football. You're not involved with it. You're just a fan. What does it matter? The way I try to explain it to people is that football is the engine that drives the car. Now, the engine doesn't go anywhere without the other parts of the car. Obviously, it just kind of sits there and hums along. It's running, but it just hums along. So it's more than just, football. Football is the engine that gets the rest of the car going. That's the way I like to kind of explain it to people and who have that type of question. And I love that you also brought up the energy, the electricity on campus and what that permeates through the rest of campus life, because we could compare that to right now. Recently, we just actually sat down with one of the current students and talked to them about the transition, because for those maybe listening off in the future, we're currently in the transition period from Coach Gus Malzahn to Brian Harsin, and the energy that was kind of lacking to start off with in this year. And now with Harsin coming in, maybe the energy is kind of shifting the other way. So it permeates everything. Campus life, you hate to admit it, but maybe academics, maybe students show up a little bit more because they're like, I got to get my grades right so I can go to that football game.
I think that's absolutely true. Yeah, 100%.
So we talked a little bit about academics, sports, and a little bit about campus life. Did you get involved in anything around outside of campus on Auburn? Like, were there places you frequented or anything like food or stuff like that?
Yeah, not a whole lot. We would go to Chihuahua or whatever.
Yeah.
There weren't nearly as many food options back then as you have now. Spent a lot of time at places like on the Opelika Highway, Rusty's and stuff. But that was all tied to that Model UN crowd. That was kind of my crowd I hung out with, and so wherever we all would go out and have a bite or have a drink or something, that was very exciting. But yeah, no, I'm a pretty nerdy guy, so I didn't have a huge social life beyond that group. So.
Hey, no judgment here. I am a professed nerd as well. We've already discussed that off the show here, so no judgment on my end. You graduated in 90 with political science, and then you stayed for your master's into 94 with political science as well. Is that anything different as a master's degree student as opposed to an undergraduate?
Yeah, actually, I graduated December of 90, and then because I had some 11 credit hour quarters there. I would drop a class. Like I probably dropped algebra. I had to pass college algebra to get my degree, and I probably dropped it 5 times before I finally. It was funny. I went in for my last quarter with my advisor, and he looked at my schedule and he saw college algebra. He's like, "What are you taking this now?" I'm like, "Well, it's taking a long time to find." I'm like, so I had to get it done. I waited till the very end. I was like, if I don't get this algebra class passed, I won't get out of here. So I graduated December of 90, and then decided to try education, because I did by that time kind of wanted to teach, but I didn't really understand exactly what I needed to get to do that. So I enrolled in the College of Education at Auburn that summer of 91, but I didn't really like it. So I finished that quarter out, and then enrolled, because by that time, John was pretty much going to go to Georgetown, and I'd kind of wanted to go. I'd applied, and we both got accepted. So we both moved to Washington, D.C. and went to Georgetown at the same time. And it just didn't work out for me as well as it did for him. He graduated from there. He got his master's from there, but I didn't like it as much. And so I came back and got my master's in 93 and 94. So, which meant that I was back in time for the Terry Bowden 20-0 run. That was pretty cool. Yeah. Again, it all comes back to football in Auburn. But
absolutely it does. And I was going to ask you about that with the whole Terry Bowden thing.
Oh, well, yeah, we can touch on that. But no, I decided I wanted to get a master's rather than be in education. So I came back and I knew the professors and I knew the program and everything. So I got back in. But I was very excited that we had, 2 of the better seasons, because I had been there for 4 really good seasons, and then things had kind of taken a downhill turn when I left. And I came back, and we went undefeated for the first 20 games of Terry Bowden's career. And that was, that 93 season, when we were 9-0 and going to Athens in an 11-game season, I had a bunch of T-shirts printed up that said 10-0 and 1 to go. And so we took them to Athens, me and my buddies and all, and their girlfriends and mine. And so we're sitting up there in the stadium, in Sanford Stadium. And when it got to like the last couple of minutes of the game, it was obvious we were going to win. We busted open the bag and we all put those on, and the Georgia people just went bananas. They couldn't stand it. So that was a highlight for the Terry Bowden run.
So it sounds to me like every time you come back to Auburn or at least to graduate, we're doing pretty good in football. So is there any way I can convince you to pay some tuition to take a class or 2 at Auburn right now?
I tell you, well, my dad was there freshman year. They won the national championship.
So, the pattern continues.
he kept reminding me of that. Like, well, we won the national championship. We weren't even called Auburn then. His freshman year, they won the national championship. His senior year, it changed from API to Auburn. So he caught some good history too. But I did go back a couple of years later, but it was 96, 97, and things didn't go quite as well. So it's not foolproof, unfortunately.
Right. So we talked a lot about football. During your time there, did you enjoy any other Auburn sports, or did you get heavily involved, kind of going to any games or events for any other programs as well?
Oh, yeah. I went to basketball all the time. In fact, I had a class in the Coliseum. And so you could go out the door of the classroom and turn a couple of corners and go out onto the floor of the arena. So I was able to sneak in and watch basketball for free a few times. That was pretty cool. As well as the high school basketball championships that were played in there. I got to go and sneak in there. And of course, it was $1 to get into Auburn basketball back then. If you went to the front gate as a student, it was football games were $4, basketball was $1. And if you showed up at halftime for the basketball game, it was free. So I went to a lot of Auburn basketball games for a very little amount of money, if any. And it was great because that was when we had I got there at the tail end of Chuck Person and the Elite Eight run. Mm-hmm. And then, they went to the NCAA tournament 2 or 3 of those years that I was there with Sonny Smith. And Sonny was awesome. And then when I came back the second time, I think that was when Tommy Joe Eagles was there, and they had Wesley Person, which was pretty cool. Just watching him shoot 3-pointers all the time was sweet. So yeah, I liked it. And then I did go to one baseball game where Frank Thomas was playing, so I got to see him dwarfing all the other players. It was like he was like the Jolly Green Giant, and then a bunch of dwarves. It was amazing how much bigger Frank was than the rest of the team. But I guess that was pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay. Quite an era for Auburn sports.
It was great. Yeah, Frank Thomas. I just missed Bo, but I caught the end of Chuck Person. I saw Frank Thomas. Barkley had been gone for a couple of years when I started, so I got some of it, but not all of it.
Absolutely. It sounds like you had a pretty well-rounded experience in terms of getting in all some the great Auburn times that have happened during the 80s, the 90s, and all that good stuff there. Talked a lot about graduating, masters. You've moved on into life, into career. We've already kind of touched on that a little bit with time in Singapore. You said you spent time in Atlanta. You're in Illinois now. What's it like being an Auburn fan in Illinois? Is there a stronghold up there of Auburn family members?
Not of family members. I don't really know. I didn't know anybody just through my in-laws. But I don't know. There's when you work at a college, you have an eclectic collection of people that graduated from all over the place. A lot of obviously Illinois and SIU folks up here. But no, the funny thing about this area is that nobody even knows college football exists. I mean, it's not like you're around Missouri fans. No, there really aren't any Missouri fans. You're around Cardinals baseball. It's all Cardinals baseball. If in Atlanta you see Brave stuff everywhere, in Alabama you see Alabama stuff everywhere. Here it's the red and blue with the bird everywhere. And a little bit of the Blues hockey team, but mostly that bird. So they're much more fascinated with baseball than and that wasn't such a culture shock for me because again I lived in Atlanta for 11 years. And when the Braves were doing pretty well, and so I was acquainted with the whole idea of a big baseball fan base. Even though growing up in Alabama, it's not really anything anybody cares much about, but relatively speaking. But no, I came to Illinois because they offered me a job. It's so funny. My first day on campus, my students, I was telling them like, yeah, I just moved here from Atlanta, and they're like, why? They're all wanting to get out of here, They're all wanting to get out of here. And it's like if somebody from Illinois got a job, at Auburn or at Ellick City, they'd be like, well, why did you come down here? Well, I wanted to, I said, I like to be able to pay for my food, and live. So it was a really good job offer and I had to come, but it's not that far away, honestly. It feels like 1,000,000 miles away, but you drive just a little bit and you're in Kentucky and then you're in Tennessee and then you're in Alabama. So it's, it's not as far as it seems probably.
Yeah, the drive for me, when I think about it, like you said, it seems a lot farther. But when you really start breaking it down like that, it's like, oh, I'm almost to Alabama. The drive's not so bad there. So do you frequent many games back here since that drive's not so bad?
About once a year. I mean, the last couple of years, John and I did a live video show. So that gave us an excuse to get to come back. Mm-hmm. And the AU bookstore has been awesome. They've let us set up. They've let Auburn Elvis come in, our producer, and set everything up, so that we could go and broadcast live with, Brandon Marcello and whatever. And that's been really cool. But even then, like we've come down for A-Day a couple of times. And we've done pretty much one game a year in Auburn. We've also, you realize up here that the rival teams that are closest are the weird ones. Like we're 2 hours from Missouri, the University of Missouri. So if Auburn, when Auburn played at Missouri in 2017, we were there, of course. We're 4 hours from Vanderbilt, and we're about 3 hours from Kentucky, University of Kentucky. So that's a weird trio of East teams. Mm-hmm. It really is the North,
Right.
But I that's why I want Auburn in the East because you'd be coming up here a lot more, and I wouldn't have to try to get to places like College Station and Tuscaloosa and all. I could just
and Baton
be
Rouge.
a lot quicker trip.
My goodness.
Yeah, see, it's too far away. Yeah, those are too far away.
Yeah, I've been up to Kentucky's stadium one time, and I'll tell you that was pretty interesting. It was definitely a different culture shock for me. Just going from these campuses down here, whether it's Tuscaloosa, Athens, Auburn, even Baton Rouge, and then you get to Kentucky, and then football is just not as big of a thing there. I mean, obviously it's basketball for them. I've not had the pleasure of being in Rupp Arena, but I will. Have you been at a game in Kentucky, Auburn, in their stadium for football?
Football, yeah, the Cam 2010.
Yeah. Okay, you were there.
We went to the 2010 game. Yeah, that was the one. No, I said that may have been the last time. Have we played at Kentucky since then? Because I feel like I would have gone if we had. That's a long time to go without playing them there.
I feel like we had one under Sean White as the quarterback. That may be incorrect, but I feel like that matches up in my memory. When Sean White was a quarterback, we had a game where it went down to like the last drive and we had to make an interception. Something like that. But yes, I think there's been at least one time. That goes back to what you were just talking about. The pain of us not being in the East is we don't get to see that side of the conference hardly ever. We don't get to play Florida. We don't get to play Tennessee. We don't get to play, South Carolina, all these teams that we might have some history with anymore. I don't want to get you started on that tonight.
Not even. This is like half of our topics on our show that we do all the time is like, why aren't we in the East?
Please put us there. All right. We have waited long enough to discuss this because we've got to talk about this. You are part of the AU Wishbone podcast with you and John Ringer, who you've already mentioned. You guys got acquainted in college and developed that friendship, and it's moved on into adult life and what you guys have been doing in your own separate worlds, but you came together for AU Wishbone. How does that start?
Oh man, it's complicated. I guess, so John and I, well, the reason I guess we're good friends is we were never roommates. That helps. All my roommates I wanted to murder, but John and I were never roommates. We would hang out together with other friends and then do Model UN stuff together as seniors. But what happened was after college, and again, we ended up at Georgetown together, so we were kind of around each other in Washington. And so we kept close. This is back when you'd make phone calls or write actual letters, okay?
Back in the day.
The internet was just coming along. Yeah, we were writing actual paper letters with stuff, which is crazy to think of now, but that's what you did. And then and phone calls. And so we've always said the Wishbone is just our phone calls that everybody can listen to, that we're still doing. And I think that's kind of what people enjoy about it is it's genuine. It's not we're not trying to manufacture anything other than when we come up with some goofy, premise or something, but we're just having our conversations. But it started out actually. There was like when the email stuff became big, there was an email newsletter where the two Daves picked the SEC, and they would have guest Daves come on and predict, and you had to be funny. Mm-hmm. And Will Collier would be on there all the time, and then John and I together would be on there, and we would like write stuff. And then we started writing for the War Eagle Reader, and Jeremy Henderson started publishing our stuff that we came up with. In fact, the columns that we started writing for him in 2010 are how we ended up deciding to do the Wishbone. And also it's where our book came from. Their first book was Season of Our Dreams. We just took our columns from that year and kind of wrote around them, what was going on. So that was our first book. And then we got tired. It was hard to type up entire columns every week for the War Eagle Reader. So I asked Jeremy, could we just record them, just do an audio thing? And so the Wishbone really started as us wanting to do our columns, but not having the time to type. You can go back on the War Eagle Reader and see we spent hours every week typing up these long, snarky, trying to be funny Auburn football history prediction columns. And it just got to be too much. So, which is ironic because I probably put more time into podcasting now than we did into that. But, it kind of became a monster and grew. So we started doing the show in the fall of 2012. And if you go back and listen to our first season, we're talking about how every episode is like, now that game was like going to the dentist for some serious dental work, watching us, get bulldozed by Texas A&M and, all that. So we picked a terrible year to start, but it gave us time to ramp up so that when 2013 got going, we had our stride, and it was just obviously a dream come true. So for the most part.
I'm glad that you guys fought through that pain of that season and continued on to do this because, podcasting was obviously around before that, but it wasn't a big thing. And I kind of associate your podcast with the rise of Auburn podcasting, that sphere, because there wasn't a lot of them out there when I started, listening to them myself, and then started getting this notion that we do our own stuff too. And in a way, I would say, and give you guys some credit, you kind of inspired some people like me to do something. So I hope that whether it was, through the War Eagle Reader and your columns there, through your snarky post on there, and then taking them into the voice thing, that I hope that you've inspired a generation of people that want to share their perspectives on Auburn podcasting.
Well, that's very much appreciated. We you tend to look at it not, we don't know what comes out of us. We just knew what we came out of. And so I know that I had been doing guest spots on shows for a while for Earth Station One Network and stuff like that. And I said, I could do this myself. I think I could do this. And I think I would rather be in charge. You know how that goes, right? So I said, John, let's do a show. And John, if you've ever listened to our show, you know that John is the most laid back, easygoing. He doesn't suffer fools, and he doesn't put up with any nonsense. But if you bring him a good idea, he'll go, okay. And you're like, oh, he loved it. Let's do it. Whereas if you bring him a bad idea, he'll go, no. And it's done. Right. So, so it seemed like a good combination, because I knew that I would be all bouncy and energetic, and John would be kind of level-headed and analytic, and I thought we'd make a good combination, and I think it has. So.
I wasn't aware of this, that he's basically the litmus test for what you guys do and don't do. That's pretty obvious. I never really thought about it before, but you're right. Now just thinking back on some of y'all's episodes.
Oh, I mean, if it was like junior year at Auburn, I'd be like, John, let's go do so-and-so. No. And then, well, okay, I guess we won't. It's always been that way. It's not a new thing. So yeah, he's always been the one to exert good judgment when I just want to run with whatever, crosses my mind in a given moment. So,
well, let's maybe to round out our discussion of your Auburn story, let's talk about being an Auburn fan post college and during this, giant time we've just kind of touched on here. What's some big sports moments that stick out to you? And, obviously there's some pretty obvious ones out there, but, for Alan Plexico's Auburn story during this time of your life, post-college, what's some of those big Auburn moments that you'll always remember, even personal ones?
Well, yeah, like getting to take my older daughter when she was 14 or 15. I took her to her first Auburn game with me. The two of us just went down there. We stayed with my sister in Sylacauga, and we went down to I think it was the Arkansas State game one year, and that was awesome because she kind of got to see everything without the whole family around everything. And then, getting to throw, we have one little tiny tree in our front yard, and, beating Alabama or winning the SEC championship, we would, my little one getting to go out and throw toilet paper in it in the middle of Illinois. Nobody knows why in the world we're out there throwing toilet paper in our own tree. They don't get that, but it was a big thing, and, just, anything that like for example, opening week, we're not which we call faculty meeting week here at our college. We're not supposed to miss that at all. And in 2011, the national championship game in Arizona was going to be the day of one of the faculty meetings, and I went to the dean, and I'm like, I know that I need to be there, but Auburn is playing for the national championship. Is there any way? Anyway, and he goes, if Auburn gets into that game, and this was when we weren't for sure in it yet. He goes, if Auburn is, he probably thought it wasn't going to happen, right? But he said, if Auburn's in the national championship game, I'll let you go. And then we were, and I'm like, you said I get to go. So he's like, yeah, I couldn't stop you from going to that. So that's the kind of thing where people up here understand how important it is. And, even my boss wasn't going to tackle me and keep me from going to that. So that was pretty cool. I don't know. I mean, other than that, it's just pretty much the same as anybody. I mean, we've, any excuse to put the more Auburn stuff on than I already normally wear and run around. The funny thing about that though is you go anywhere around here, around St. Louis, Illinois, whatever. And this is a phenomenon I've talked about on Twitter with other people have agreed, is you'll see somebody in an Auburn hat or Auburn shirt, and we say War Eagle. 9 times out of 10, their response is either nothing or look at you like you're crazy. Mm-hmm. Like in Alabama, you get a War Eagle. Up here, sometimes I'll press this and go, War Eagle? You going to say War Eagle? And they're like, huh? Well, when we say War Eagle, I found this on the ground. I got that one time. I found this Auburn hat on the ground and just kept it. I don't know what it means. Or one guy, oh, this is my cousin's shirt. I don't know anything about. So it's weird. You don't get this. I always hear these stories of people in like Uzbekistan getting War Eagled. And I'm like, I'm not that far away from home. And these people don't even know that they wear Auburn stuff and don't even know to say War Eagle. So I don't know what to do with that. That's just puzzled me my whole life that I'm up here.
I've found this formula that works for me. I kind of try to think about proportional wise. The distance that I get from Auburn is whether I approach someone in that manner, to the point where I was in Alaska one time and we were in this mall in Alaska, and I saw this person working in one of the shops and didn't say anything. She was wearing Auburn gear, but didn't say anything. She approached me and said, War Eagle. I'm like, okay, thank you so much for addressing me, because I wanted to, but I didn't know if you were just someone wearing a shirt or you were actually an Auburn fan. So I think that's funny you brought that up. The distance seems to be proportional to how likely you are to get that back.
If I had said something to her, she'd have been like, huh? I don't know what you're talking about. So it happens to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just cursed with the War Eagle thing. But by the way, my wife, though, used to say they're like this cult. They have a secret password and everything. She's into it now and has been for years. But originally it was kind of like, what are you doing? What are you saying? Like, no, trust me. Then, of course, people look at you like you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I promise. Normally they'd say War Eagle back. I'm not just crazy. So
I think many of our Auburn family members have probably had similar stories out there. War Eagle moments are great when they happen, but boy, can they be awkward when they don't happen, because then you're like the weird kid getting some sign that's like, what are you talking about? Anything else from your Auburn story that you'd like to share before we start rounding out our show?
No, I wish that we could go back more often, get back down there and just see everybody, just see the campus and see the people and just be there, not just in sporting goods. I'm so jealous. John's parents lived there and have for the last several years. They retired from Atlanta and moved back there. And I'm like, man, what a dream, to be able to just walk to every Auburn sporting event. That would be so fantastic. So I'm jealous of them, but I love it. And I hope that I can continue to come up with fun historical things to talk about. And by the way, John and I are working on Volume 1 and Volume 2 of 2 new books.
Nice.
Based on our We Believe series. So hopefully we'll have the first one of those out this fall. Yeah, talking about Auburn history from the end of Suge up through Terry Bowden.
That was going to be another one of my last questions for you. Any other publications we're working on? So I'm glad we got to know that here. So people can be watching for that, obviously a little bit off in the future from when we're recording this. But hopefully you'll check out any of Van and John's publications out there, their podcasts. There's plenty of opportunities to get to know them better as Auburn family members. Van, I think this is the time in the show where I'd like to round it out with not so rapid fire questions. The reason I phrase it that way is because usually people need to explain themselves or I want explanations further. So if you're ready, we'll get started with that.
All right, let's do it.
12 questions. Question number 1, orange or blue? The look on your face is priceless.
How can I choose? They have to go together. That's like saying the chocolate or the peanut butter and the Reese's.
I understand, but
you gotta have them together.
I'm gonna push the issue though, orange or blue.
All right. Well, I came up under Pat Dye, who said we're a blue team. I'm not big on that whole orange thing. White was Pat Dye's second color. Orange was kind of on the fringe. I guess I'll go blue, but under protest.
Okay. I'll let that stand even under protest. Question 2, it doesn't get any easier. Aubie or War Eagle?
All right, now Aubie is a critter. War Eagle, like the saying or the bird?
The bird, the mascots.
Oh, okay. The two mascots. Okay, yes. Okay. Aubie or the War Eagle? Aubie. I love Aubie. The bird is awesome. Can't take anything away from the birds. I guess we have multiple birds. We only had one bird a lot of the time I was there, obviously. Tiger ruled. But Aubie's the best, so I have to go Aubie. But you're right. It doesn't get any easier. That's you're asking me to pick which of my kids is my favorite one, man. That ain't right.
One of my favorite things about this questionnaire is just watching people squirm. I don't know what that says about me as an individual, but
sadistic. Yeah. That's what it says.
All right, maybe this is a little bit easier. I don't know. Question 3: your favorite part of the Auburn Fight song. So it can be a word, a phrase, any part of the Auburn Fight song. What's your favorite?
I can never get where go feel to find your orange and blue. Musically, I think it's the go, 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 because it kind of changes gear there. I like that it's going along doing one thing and then all of a sudden kind of shifts gear and then it does something else. That's pretty cool. But in terms of lyrics, you got to like the cussing. Come on. I like the fact that our fight song has cussing in it.
It was the first time as a child you could do that.
Yeah. I liked. I hung out for a while with some friends that were in the Baptist Student Union. They tried really hard to be good kids, and they just would squirm when that part of the fight circle came around. And I always felt, or like when you do Body Getta, right, and it's got it in it too. Yeah. And they'd be like finding creative ways to get around that. And I'm like, man, it's the fight song, and just go with it. But so yeah, I like that. I like that it's colorful. Put it that way.
All right, question 4, and this is probably the easiest one you'll get. Your favorite Auburn athletics program of all 12 of them, I think that are out there, but your favorite Auburn athletics program.
Sport, you mean?
Sports, excuse me. Yeah, sports program is, I guess, to clarify that.
I'm going to say, because I do an Auburn program, so I wasn't sure what you meant by program. Auburn. Football. I mean, basketball has its allure, but understand, for the vast majority of the time that I've watched Auburn basketball, it's been mediocre to horrible. And the football is the lifeblood of the campus. So basketball is trendy these days, and God bless Bruce, but football is football.
Absolutely. Question 5, your favorite Auburn athlete of all time.
It used to be Damian Craig.
Used to be, but he's ticked me off a few times as a coach, and that's shattered my impressions of him as a quarterback. Although that 97 year, man, it's one thing to be the quarterback that's great on a team that's pretty good. He was Michael Jordan, not with the Bulls, but with like a high school team, and he carried that team on his back. But I mean, honestly, in terms of accomplishments, how can it not be Cam? I mean, Cam delivered the thing that Bo couldn't deliver, that Damian Craig couldn't deliver, that Pat Dye arguably couldn't deliver. Cam got it done what nobody else has been able to do in my lifetime. And so I think it's pretty much Cam. Good answer there. I have few things to argue with on that. Question 6, your favorite Auburn football coach of all time, or coach in general. Doesn't have to be football, but your favorite Auburn coach.
Man, Bruce is making a case. Mm-hmm. If we'd won the national championship, if Virginia had gotten called for their flagrant violations at the end of that game, and we had gone on to win the national championship, I'd be like, because think about this. I always used to say that the sports that I love, in different sports, in different teams, in different sports, I've always said the 2 hardest things to win it all in my sports would be the United States winning the World Cup and Auburn winning the national championship in basketball. And I said, honestly, I think I'm more likely to see the United States win the World Cup in my lifetime than Auburn win a national championship in basketball. And Bruce Pearl almost did what I would have said was absolutely impossible. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if the Gus Malzahn era had worked out better, you guys know I love Gus. I wanted so bad for 2013 to be the standard instead of the high point. I didn't want him to be Terry Bowden, which is kind of what it ended up being. And I mean, Pat Dye, my gosh. So it's tough. It's somewhere between Pat Dye and Bruce Pearl, honestly. And isn't it funny? I'm not saying Gene Chizik, because I don't think that I can't give him the credit. I think he did a lot. I'm just talking myself in circles, aren't I?
No, hey, I enjoy this part of the questionnaire more than anything, watching people kind of circle around a little bit.
I have to. I guess Pat Dye, but for 82 and for 89 and for 83 and all that, the Sugar Bowls but Bruce is making a case. We'll put it that way. If he were a football coach doing for the football team what he's doing for the basketball team, we would be up there with Nick Saban right now in terms of, you know what I mean? Because it's so much higher to start with.
Yeah.
He took us from like the absolute outhouse to almost the penthouse, which is, unheard of. So
He absolutely did. And the journey's still going for now, at least. So hope he doesn't get too big and just leave us someday. But we are thankful for Coach Bruce Pearl.
Every moment.
All right. Question 7, your favorite Auburn non-athletics person. So a little clarification. This can be family member, a professor, just a friend, anything that is not directly associated with Auburn athletics, like an athlete or a coach or something like that.
Yeah, that's a hard one too, because there have been so many. There were so many great professors. I think that probably, at least in terms of that, my favorite one would have been Dr. McFarland, the history professor for so long, the Air Force related guy. I mean, he really got me interested in history more than I already was, and in wanting to teach to a great degree. But I guess, other than that, we kind of claimed Jimmy Buffett a little bit for like one quarter, right? Before he went to LSU and then dropped that entirely. But I guess I had quite a few really good professors that I guess, who am I forgetting that's out there? Tim Cook also, obviously,
Yeah.
But McFarland probably had the most impact on my career and life choices. So I'll go with him.
Yeah, I love it when people can give a shout out to professors, whether they're still there or not, just because I think, they deserve recognition for the minds that they're molding and the investment they're putting in the future of, the Auburn family in a different sense. Question 8, your favorite Auburn building, campus, off campus, if you can make a case for it being somewhere else in the country, but your favorite Auburn building.
In a twisted, evil, perverted way, my home for the longest time was Haley Center.
What is going on here? We have had a trend of people pick at Haley Center. We're in some alternate reality.
It's awful. It's terrible, but it's like the vortex of crap, but it's there at the center of the vortex, right? That's where I took 80% of my undergraduate classes. I was very excited when I came back, to get my and when I got my master's, that it was there. When I came back to try to do some PhD work a bit later on, I was over in Bowden Hall, isn't it? Or is it that's an Emory? The one, no, Thatch, Thatch, right across the street. But that never felt like home. Haley Center, for all of its annoyingness, its weirdness, that's home. That's home.
It's a home for many people because they're still stuck there to this day in the vortex and can't get out. So,
Yes. Figure out where any of the rooms are.
Yeah, it's quite a mess, but it is something that is uniquely Auburn and should remain that way. Question number 9, your favorite Auburn place to eat.
It's not even close, honestly. I don't know if that location is even there anymore, but my first ever, like, the first week I was back at Auburn with my roommates, and by this point, they had figured everything out and were showing me. We went to Guthrie's, where it was at the intersection going toward Opelika.
Yep.
At the Y there, and that's it. That was my introduction to something I'd never experienced before. Chicken fingers and French fries, and chicken fingers that with sauce, and chicken fingers that were much, much better than any normal place would cook them. And I'm like, this is a revelation. And so, yeah.
Speaking of vortexes and like alternate realities, this is like 2 episodes in a row, not only that someone's picked Haley Center, but then picked that specific Guthrie's as well.
Yeah, go to the one out on Glen now. I lived 14 different places in Auburn while I was there. I average moving every 6 months for some strange reason, but I lived down the street from that Guthrie's, and I lived on Glen near the other one out there. So It was always handy. Yeah, absolutely love it. And I got my whole family converted over. We go to Cane's all the time now.
I don't know if I can talk to you anymore for liking Cane's. I had a bad experience down there in Baton Rouge, and ever since it's been like, I can't do it anymore. But we can agree on Guthrie's at least. All right, question 10. Your favorite Auburn traditions can be sports, non-sports, a personal tradition that nobody else would have, but your favorite Auburn tradition.
We have so many, and we make such a big deal out of it. We really play up the whole idea of Auburn traditions, which always I always see signs on campus people advertising, it's the newest Auburn tradition. I'm like, if it's new, it's not a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Traditions happen organically over time. You can't declare something a tradition. It has to evolve, it has to become accepted over time. So that's stupid. But, it's hard to get past Rolling Toomer's Corner, honestly. It's like this weird thing that we have that nobody else has, that it combines fellowship and gathering with celebration and unity with an activity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an activity that even kids can do and have fun with. And so when you combine all those things together, it's a combination of, it's like a family reunion, a victory celebration, and a crazy, wacky, fun activity that kids enjoy all at the same time. And if it didn't exist and the university said, we need to create some kind of tradition that involves those elements, it would be hard to think of something that would combine all those things together. And yet this just organically grew over time, and that's how it's real, I think, is when it comes together over time and everybody wants to do it. It's not, other than to the poor trees, arguably, it's not that harmful. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, it's something, I don't know that anybody's ever put it so well as you just have, explaining what makes it so special. Because, when you try to explain it to someone that's not an Auburn fan, their usually response is, so you're vandalizing. In a sense, but it's like, it's legal vandalism to some extent. But it's a very special tradition that's hard to beat. So I'm happy you picked that one.
Yeah.
Question 11, your favorite Auburn memory.
Well, there's probably some I can't say on the air. It was college days after all. But I think that probably my favorite Auburn memory was in fall of '89. I've made friends with John and his girlfriend Denise and several other people, and my girlfriend that was going to UAB at the time came down, and we got up early that Saturday morning and walked to the stadium at like 7:00 in the morning for the Alabama game, first time ever. And we all sat out there outside the student gates for like 7 hours or something, and nobody was bored. It was electric, they always say. It really was. It was, it was just this sense that something huge was about to happen, and yet you weren't exactly sure how it was going to come out. And that whole day is probably my single favorite. And the day before, I had horrible food poisoning and thought I wasn't going to get to go at all. I had one of my stupid roommates had left out my orange juice like overnight and then put it back in the refrigerator. And I got so sick, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to go the first time ever game. I don't know what I'm going to do. And my girlfriend came down and got me stuff to drink to rehydrate me and everything. And the next day I was able to go. And I doubly appreciated, not only that it was happening, but that I had somehow miraculously gotten well enough to go to it. So that first time ever game in December 2nd, 1989 will live forever. That was just such a unbelievable thing. Yeah.
And
it was one of those things you don't think you'll ever see in your lifetime.
Yeah. And you've got the extra special thing that you almost missed it too. So it just adds to it, the fact that you made it there despite all that. All right. Your final question. I want you to describe Auburn to me in one word other than family.
Love. Because the love of Auburn and the love of each other as Auburn family members is what holds us all together. We love the teams. We love the place. We love the people. It's not just about winning a game. It's funny. It's like for Alabama fans and for others, a lot of them, it's about winning, right? It's about, look at me, I can win. The thing I'm associated with can win. Whereas for us, it's that we love Auburn, and Auburn winning gives us pride in that love that we already had. It's not about the winning. It's about seeing Auburn living up to what we want it to be, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to round that out. And I love the way you expressed the word love there and what it means to us and how it differentiates us from a little bit of, the rivals but just, other fans of other sports in general as well. This is a very unique team, university, town, family. And you are a very unique, but also very special member of the Auburn family. And so we're very appreciative for you sharing your Auburn story with us. Really quickly, though, I would like for you to share where people can find your podcast and your books that you currently have out, just so that you can get a quick little plug for that.
Well, appreciate it. Yeah, and we appreciate you and all. And I mean, I got to tell you, everybody that goes beyond the call of duty to do the things that we do, both of us and others for Auburn, has my complete respect and appreciation and admiration.
Thank you.
And I've followed you and your show and you guys from the beginning, and so I know that it's every bit as important to you guys and you as it ever has been to John and me. So you can hear our show on it's the AU Wishbone. It's on Apple Podcasts, iTunes. It's on Podbean, Podbean, for those that go there. It's on Spotify, and we posted on Twitter. We posted on Facebook. There's a Facebook page. There's a Twitter account at AU Wishbone. And sometimes we're on the War Eagle Reader site, sometimes not. It just depends on if I think to send it to Jeremy or not. Yeah, that's where it started, though. And then, so that's the show. And we have a YouTube channel, too. So occasionally we do a live simulcast when we're recording.
And the books, can they find that on Amazon, or is where is the best place to find the books?
Yeah, if you're in Auburn, AU Bookstore, I think keeps them in stock. But Amazon would be the best place to go for sure. We've got Season of Our Dreams, which covered the 2010 season. We have Decades of Dominance, which we're getting ready to update. I always hesitate to say that because people will stop buying the one that's there now.
Right.
If we say, there's a new one coming. It will have. We published that in early 2013, and so it's coming time to go ahead and do a 10-year refresh on it. It doesn't have anything from Gus's era at all, really. So it's time to refresh that book. But yeah, those are on Amazon. And like I said, we'll have We Believe Volume 1 coming soon, too.
Awesome. So you got stuff to look forward to, Auburn family. And I hope that you'll go check out their podcasts, their books. And I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Auburn Roots, episode 26 with Van Allen Plexico. Thank you again to Van. Thank you to the listeners. And we'll be back again very soon to tell another Auburn story and share some more Auburn Roots. War Eagle.
War Eagle.